I don't really know how to use this kind of microphone. Well, I grew up in a rural part of Pennsylvania where everybody was a factory worker, and that has everything to do with this story. I didn't want to work in these factories at all. My family, they were miserable. Everybody was miserable. So I ran away as a teenager to Philadelphia. And it was great. I was doing everything I wanted to do. Of course, it was the beginning of it was like right at the very beginning of the AIDS epidemic. And I wound up losing half of everybody I knew and loved. That plays a big part in all of this as well, which I could go, to connect that would be very easy, but I just don't want to spend too much time with that part at the moment. Here's why I started using these somatic poetry rituals. I didn't have a problem with writing. I was writing the whole time. We're talking about so I started writing in 1975. I arrived in Philadelphia in 1984. Between that time and 2005, I'm writing in the way I always, I call the old-fashioned way. You become inspired and you write. And then there was this new graduate program for writing. I was making new friends with some of these students. And they had their writing lives and the lives they were living were connected in a way that I didn't have that connection. I wasn't sure what that was about. So I started looking into it, and I realized it was our backgrounds. They come from white-collar workers, doctors, lawyers, engineers, and I came from factory workers. And the thing about factory work, if you don't know any factory workers or didn't grow up around them, is that when they go to work, they become an extension of that machine they're working at for 10 hours. Nobody's working 8 hours anymore, 10 to 12 hours. And in order to survive working at a machine, becoming an extension of a machine for literally half the day, you have to shut the present off. You would absolutely lose your mind if you were present for your, metal machine punch, whatever the hell you're doing. My family, they make cardboard boxes, there's some ketchup packets. And so they shut the present off, but they don't know how to turn it back on. So then their brain lives in the past and the present and the future. And when I talk to them, they're either depressed about the past or anxious about the future. And there's no sense of the present ever. And when they all get together, all they do is talk about the past, or they're upset about what might be coming. There's no sense of where we are. And it's because of these jobs that they all work. And as a child, I absorbed these tools. I call them tools of survival. To be able to survive. These are coping mechanisms. So I avoided the present because I didn't know what the present was. And I realized this finally in 2005, and I began these rituals because these rituals anchor me in the present. They're very, strange things you do. The first ones that I did, I had a single color food for a day for 7 days. I would wear the colors well. And so for the red poem, the first poem was the red poem, I found a red wig in this beauty academy down the street from where I lived that was in the dumpster in the alley. And it was really long. And it was permed on half the side and the other side was straight. So it was like this. It was literally straight and like this. And I go to Barnes & Noble. I don't buy anything there. I don't like Barnes & Noble, but I like to use them as a library because they have all these up-to-date books. And if you go to Barnes & Noble, when you go to the business section, there is a subsection called research, marketing research. And those, I refer to that as the new anthropology. These people studying our behavior and our physiology, how our eyeballs work, everything to sell us, things we absolutely don't need. Otherwise, they wouldn't need to if they were selling food that we would need anyway. One of these articles I was reading prior to this crisis, I refer to it as a crisis, this moment where it's like, oh my God, my writing is not connected in the way that everybody else is. I was reading in one of these books this article about research on how, as much as it's hard, I still find this hard to believe, 80 to 90% of human interaction is nonverbal. Isn't that amazing? Maybe it's old information to you. I mean, it is now, but back in 2005, my mind was blown. Like, how's that possible? So I thought, okay, how can I use this? And then I find this red wig that's like this and like this. I should have a sign out there that says, just come in. So while I was walking around the city, so the first day, let me just tell you about the first day of this, and then I'm going to move into these other things. That first day with that first poem, the red poem, I walked around the city eating red food and wearing this red wig, and the wig upset people, so they would walk clear around me. So I got a lot of nonverbal communication all day long. At the end of that day, I realized two things. The first was that it worked. I was present the entire time, probably the most present I'd ever been in my life writing. And then the second thing I realized was I would have never written that poem for any other reason at any other time, meaning that the rituals actually create the language. The rituals that you do with these things, they create the circumstance for the language to come out the way that it does. And of course, depending on what you eat in the morning is going to affect the art you're creating and the writing you're doing. Everything that we do is we're collaborating with everything. So it was very exciting. And I went on to do hundreds of these. And so this is Amanda Paradise, my new book. The book just prior to this is called While Standing in Line for Death. And in that book, I wanted to do something different. I knew that these rituals could do other things. And I had a boyfriend back in the 80s who was in ACT UP. Are you familiar with ACT UP? The AIDS Coalition, Unleash Power. We had so many friends dying, and he was out there. He introduced me to this activism when I was a teenager. He was a few years older than me. But he became burnt out from the experience of doing all of this work and just going to so many funerals, like 3 funerals in 1 week we went to, and he had enough, and he went to Tennessee briefly to work in a spiritualism, quote marks for me, queer spiritual community. And I didn't like that he was going down there, because I had visited this community, and the local people were furious that these queer people were on the side of this mountain. I mean, furious. Anyway, he found a cave to meditate, and he was doing the gardening during the day. He changed his name to Earth, after all, so he was very excited about working, with growing things. And so I was on the phone with him. I was working at this queer bookstore, and he said, when you come down to visit me next month, I'll show you the cave. And then 3 days later, he's dead, and it was absolutely mind-blowing. It's just to be able to catch up with that. And even after all the people we saw died, I just never imagined he would die. And it was so sudden. And the police told me that his death was a suicide. And then the medical examiner, his identical twin brother, comes in to where I'm working and shows me the medical examiner's report. And he was hogtied, gagged, tortured, raped, covered in gasoline, burned alive, and there was no empty gasoline container on site. You don't need forensic science, this is a murder. But the sheriff was very angry that I was very persistent. I was like, you have to tell the district attorney to invite the FBI. If you're not going to investigate, let somebody else investigate. And when he started referring to me as faggot as my name, he was kind of polite in a certain way in the beginning, and then he got angrier and angrier, and then eventually sends the Philadelphia police to my home in Philadelphia. 3 officers arrive. And my mistake was walking onto the hallway. One of them grabbed me by my hair and slammed my head against the wall. One other one kicks my legs apart, and the third one's screaming in my ear to leave their brothers in blue in Tennessee alone. And that's when my depression set in. I wasn't depressed at that point. I was angry. I was going to make these people figure out who the murderers were. To this day, his death is still written up as a suicide in Tennessee. The sheriff I had to deal with back then is in prison for raping women in the jail. 3 of his deputies were fired and went to prison for shutting down meth labs and keeping the money and the drugs. And the district attorney who needed to invite the FBI was fired and disbarred for corruption. Those were the human beings I had to deal with. So it went nowhere. The Southern Law Watch Project was very helpful as best as they could. They didn't have a unit at that point for violence against LGBTQ people, but they were they told me who to go. Anyway, nothing ever worked out. There was even a documentary made about this. Nothing. So, but my depression was the problem. I was a dancer before this happened. I was very athletic, and I started gaining weight, and I gained a lot of weight. And then I did a ritual in the book, While Standing in Line for Death, where he gave me a crystal last time I saw him that I put under my hair wrap. Then I would swallow a smaller crystal that would extract his information. That crystal he gave me was in his pocket for almost a year and a half. So it was absorbing all of his information, his days, his feelings. And it was exactly what I needed to do, because within a week it was over. I was feeling better. It turned around very quickly. That book also has 3 political action rituals where I was doing rituals in North Carolina during the HB2 law, the anti-trans law. And that was the only anti-trans law that existed at the time. And we got it overturned, which was amazing. But now there are a dozen laws, not bills, but laws, 150 bills, anti-queer bills being presented right now. This country is really, it's becoming so fascist so quickly. And anyway, doing these rituals was exciting though, because I'm almost 60 now, and I'm like, I just feel so old, just like tired out there screaming at people and getting people throwing shit at you and spitting on you. It takes a toll on you. I chose Asheville to set up camp because that's where all the big Christian universities were that were pushing this, Bob Jones and Billy Graham. And they came out against us, let me tell you. But it didn't matter, it got overturned. But one of the rituals I did, there were 3 of them that I did. One of them I took the Paul's letter to the Romans, which is where all the anger against queers comes from, it comes from him. The one person who never met Jesus in the Bible, saying that basically queers should be genocided in certain terms.